Okay, so about a week ago, Dr. Shiva Ayadurai made this video claiming that there was election fraud in the 2020 election in Michigan. So he showed this data here illustrating what he was claiming was fraud. Now, you can look at the video if you want in more detail. I'll just explain it in a very brief way. What we're looking at here is on the y-axis. His axes aren't labeled, but anyway, on the y-axis, what we're seeing is this is a percentage of people who voted for Trump minus the percentage of people who voted for the Republican Party in straight ticket voting, which is something you can do in some places but very few. Straight ticket voting means you vote for a party and all the candidates down the ballot for that party. So we have the percentage of people who voted for Trump minus the percentage of people who voted for the Republican Party plotted against the percentage of people who voted for the Republican Party. So why didn't he just plot the percentage of people who voted for Trump against the percentage of people who voted for the Republican Party? That would have been what you maybe would typically think of as a correlation graph. I don't know. It doesn't add any information. All it does is, in my opinion, it makes it unnecessarily complicated. And what we're doing by doing Trump minus essentially the x-axis going against what's on the x-axis, we're sort of tilting this correlation graph. So it's a correlation graph you could think of that's tilted. So you could have, if you have a correlation with a slope of 1, you're going to see dots moving in a horizontal direction. So what we're seeing here is a correlation between the people who voted for Trump and the people who voted for the Republican Party. And the correlation has a slope of less than 1. And Dr. Shiva Ayadurai says that that means that there was election fraud because that is not what this is supposed to look like. So this is what he said it's supposed to look like in his video that he put out about a week ago. In a normal case, and the dots should be going in a straight line. I guess you could say a positive correlation with a slope of 1. So in response to this video, I think he was this guy was probably getting a lot of questions. So this is Matt Parker. He does a channel called Stand Up Maths, where he talks about a bunch of math topics, and I think he was getting a lot of questions about elections stuff, what with everything going on. So he made, think of it as like a math data diss track video. So he's basically debunking Dr. Shiva's claims that this data indicates that there was election fraud. And so he plotted the same data that Dr. Shiva plotted, and he did the same for Biden. And then he did it the normal way, where you just plot one against the other, and you just see this normal correlation graph. And he did that for each candidate. And he said, look, it's just a positive correlation between people who vote for a candidate and the people who vote for that candidate's party. So what's the big deal? It's just a positive linear correlation. And why should that mean that there's any fraud or anything like that? So Dr. Shiva did not take this without without a fight. He responded with a scathing rebuttal, doubling down on the claims that he was making that there was election fraud and that your graph should not look this way. When you plot the percentage of people who vote for a candidate and the percentage of people who vote for the candidate's party in this fashion, it's not how this is supposed to look. So he says there's actually supposed to be this swooping curve where it goes up and then back down, and this is how it's supposed to look. And this is in his response video. But what we saw in Michigan in 2020 was just this straight line going down. And I imagine that at this point there's probably some bells going off because, wait a minute, didn't he say that it's supposed to be a straight line? Yes. So he changed his argument. In his first video, he said that the dots are supposed to be going kind of in a straight line like this. And then in his response video to Matt Parker, he said that actually it's supposed to be a swooping curve that goes up and then gradually comes down. And that if it doesn't look like this, then there's something fishy going on, i.e., election fraud. So who's right? Is this what this plot is supposed to look like? Rather than try to get into the math and some of the theory behind it, I think that the simplest thing to do would just be to look at another data set where we can presume there was no election fraud and see if maybe we see what Dr. Shiva is talking about and see if maybe there is something fishy going on, or is this typical, and is Matt Parker right? Unfortunately, there's not a lot of data sets like this because you have to find one that, first of all, that's organized by precinct so you can plot the precincts. And second of all, it needs to be a place that has straight ticket voting. And then you need to have all of that data recorded. So, but I found one. I wish I had more. There's probably some more if I kept digging, but I was able to find a great data set. It's not that big, but it's great. It has all this information that we're looking for. It's from American University's website. It has the precincts, and it has all of that data of not only the candidates that were voted for in each precinct, but also this straight ticket voting. So I was able to make these graphs. So this is actually in Rhode Island, because apparently in 2000 you could do straight ticket voting in Rhode Island. Here's my code here. I'm not going to go over it. Some people might not know what any of this means or care. Some people might. So feel free to just pause it right here if you want to know how I got what I got. But I made these graphs just like the one that Shiva Ayyadurai was talking about. But I did this for Rhode Island, and this is the 2000 election between George Bush and Al Gore. So, what did I find? Is Shiva right? Is this weird? Or is Matt Parker right? And is this normal when you see a straight line going down? So yeah, buckle in. This is the moment of truth right here. Are you nervous? This is what I found. So here's a county. So here's the first county. Each of these dots are a precinct. So this is Bush, who voted in percent compared to the people who voted for the Republican Party, and then I did the same for the Democratic Party with Gore versus the Democratic Party. So these two graphs will correspond. Both of these two are a county, and on the left in the Republican graph, you have people who you have precincts that don't have a lot of people voting Republican. And on the right, you have a high percentage of people who are voting Republican. And in the Democrat graph, it's reversed. And these graphs should loosely correlate to one another, because if you subtract the percentage of people who voted for the Republican Party from one, you're going to get something pretty close to the percentage of people who vote for the Democratic Party. And that same goes for the two candidates. So these two graphs will loosely correlate to one another, with the exception of, some people who vote for third parties, and you have blank votes and stuff like that. So this first graph, let's make this a game. So this first graph, I would say this is 1 point for Matt Parker. I mean, and you could say maybe there was some fraud going on here in Rhode Island, but wouldn't Rhode Island be like the least likely place you would commit election fraud? I mean, so that's possible. It's possible that there was election fraud going on here. But I would say that Rhode Island, as small as it is and as blue as it is, it's probably the least likely place that you would have election fraud. So it's possible, but I think you can say, based on what we're seeing based on this first county, is that if there was election fraud in the 2020 election, then there was probably election fraud in the 2000 election here in this county in Rhode Island. I mean, maybe some people are seeing some curve going on here, but it's pretty linear. This is a straight line. So that's 1 point for Matt Parker. 0 points for Shiva. So let's look at the next county. What have we got here? So is this a swooping curve? I don't think so. I would say that's linear. Now, the correlation is weaker than in the last county, but I'm not seeing this curve that Shiva said is what you're supposed to be seeing. If anything, it looks more like what we saw in Michigan than what Shiva said is supposed to look like. So I would say that's 2 points for Matt Parker, 0 points for Dr. Shiva. Let's look at county number 3. Again, really weak correlation on this one. The dots are kind of spread out. So sometimes we have a strong correlation, sometimes we have a weak correlation. And so maybe you could say you're starting to kind of see this curve that Dr. Shiva says you're supposed to be seeing. But let's be generous. Let's give Dr. Shiva 1 point for county number 3 in Rhode Island. So yeah, so it's 2-1. In this county, in this fourth county, this looks this way because this is a very democratic region. So we have a lot of precincts with a low percentage of people who voted for the Republican Party, and you have a lot of precincts with a high percentage of people who voted for the Democratic Party. So this is a very democratic sample of precincts. But is that curved, like the way Dr. Shiva says that it's supposed to be, or is that just a linear correlation going down? I think I'm not seeing any curve here, so that's 3-1. And our last one, not that we need to see it because we already have 3-1, best 3 out of 5 wins, obviously, but let's look at this last one here. And there's outliers in this one, but aside from the outliers, it's going in a straight line. With the outliers in there, you kind of have one curving the opposite way and then one curving this way. So what do you guys think? My conclusions are that if this is an indication of fraud, then there was also fraud in Rhode Island in 2000. So if we had one counterexample to this graph that Dr. Shiva presented as what's supposed to be the normal case, if we had one counterexample, we could say then, okay, well, what we saw in Michigan is not necessarily fraud because that has happened before. But we didn't just see one counterexample. All of these are counterexamples, all 5 of them. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think, but I would say that Matt Parker wins this one hands down. So thanks for checking out my video. Let me know if you have any thoughts. And this is my first video like this. I think I'll probably make more like this. So thanks for checking in, and I'll catch you next time.